We would like to thank Zara Studios from Australia in this lesson for their contribution towards Thuma Mina Teaching. Zara Studios specializes in high quality handcrafted leather goods. Welcome to Thuma Mina Teaching. This is your 7th grade 9 history lesson for term 2. In this lesson we are going to discuss the arms race as well as the space race during the Cold War. When we look at those two bombs that fell on Japan at the end of the Second World War, it marked a new era of warfare. It changed warfare completely, and warfare would never be the same again. In this lesson we are going to look at nuclear weapons, but we're going to put it in perspective with the broader history of weapon technology. And when we look at history, we would see that nations always tried to be first in terms of weapon technology. This list is in no specific order. Let's start with chariots, this mobile platform, and there can be an archer on top of this mobile platform. It changed warfare completely. The crossbow was a very small, very effective, very powerful weapon, so much so that it was outlawed in parts of Europe during the 11th century. Let's move over to the trebuchet. The trebuchet changed siege warfare. It was very effective against castles. And then we can move over to gunpowder. And gunpowder, in my opinion, was the biggest jump in weapon technology. It just changed everything. If a nation was in front with gunpowder, it was miles in front on the battlefield. And then we can move over to cannons. Cannons transformed warfare completely on sea and on land. A very powerful piece of artillery that can be used miles away from the enemy. And then tanks. Tanks became the central part of armies, first used in the First World War. The English used it against the Germans, and apparently it was very effective. Tanks went through major advancements, and we can see it in the Second World War when we look at a tank like the Tiger tank, the most feared tank in the Second World War. This tank of the Germans was apparently so effective that it would, on average, destroy 11.5 tanks before they lose one Tiger tank. Very effective tank. So arms technology is a very interesting topic. We can talk about it for a long time. And why talk about it in the first place? It's to put nuclear weapons in perspective. You put it on that list. But should be on its own list completely, because it was so different. The devastation that nuclear weapons brought was just on a new scale. You can't even compare it. Nuclear weapons brought so much destruction that it was not only feared by the opponent but by the rest of the world because it has so much power. I made a short compilation of real footage of nuclear bomb tests just to give the idea of how powerful these weapons actually are. So when it comes to the Soviet Union and the USA, they found themselves in a new era of warfare. And previously, before nuclear weapons, if two nations had so much tension against each other, physical warfare was likely to happen. But not in this case, because with the nuclear weapons, it changed everything. So you might ask, was it not an option at all? Did they know it won't happen? Not at all. It was a possibility, and therefore they continuously prepared themselves for war. they would try to develop stronger, more accurate nuclear weapons that can travel further and obviously more powerful. During the course of the Cold War, more than 2,000 nuclear tests were made, which is quite devastating. In 1961, the largest bomb ever tested, the Tsar Bomb, was tested by the Russians. This bomb, just to give you an idea, was 1,400 times bigger than those that fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was so big that the shockwave of the explosion went around Earth 3 times. From the point of explosion, 800 kilometers further, windows were shattered due to the shockwave. Today you can even look on Google Maps and see the crater of the Tsar Bomb. So the question arises, where will it stop? And both of these nations came to the point of MAD, mutual assured destruction. And what that means is that both nations knew that if they would go into warfare, that will mean complete destruction on both ends. And on this point, I think it's good to mention that it was not only those two countries. The USA formed a pact with many other countries, which was called NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. A few years later, the Russians followed and formed an alliance, the Warsaw Pact. And if you look at this world map, the dark blue are countries that formed part of the NATO organization, and the dark red countries formed part of the Warsaw Pact. The light blue countries are the countries that affiliated themselves to the USA, and the light red countries affiliated themselves to the Russians. And so you could see that if physical warfare actually erupted between those countries, it would have been a third world war. So the competition between Russia and the USA went further than the arms race itself, which brings me to the space race. The space race aimed to expand the influence of the nation beyond the atmosphere, which is quite remarkable if you think about it. Today, satellites is something that is common, but those days, to have your influence expand beyond the atmosphere was something quite incredible. The USSR was first with this space race when they launched the Sputnik 1 in 1957. This was the first satellite to orbit the Earth. The next year, the USA followed with the Explorer 1. The year after that, in 1959, the USA launched Explorer 6, and the Explorer 6 took the first photo of the Earth. That same year, 1959, the USSR sent Luna 2, and Luna 2 reached the surface of the moon. And later that year, they sent Luna 3, and Luna 3 took a photo of the back of the moon. In 1960, the USSR sent Belka and Strelka, 2 dogs, beyond the atmosphere. The year after that, the USA sent Hum, a chimpanzee, to space. The same year, 1961, the USSR really pushed the boundaries, and they sent a person, the first person outside the atmosphere, Yuri Gagarin, and the USA saw that they were behind in this space race. And that same year, JFK, President of the United States, said that they will be the first people on the moon. Quite a bold promise that he made, but they actually achieved it. Within 10 years, in 1969, Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin were the first people to walk on the moon's surface. This marked pretty much the end of the space race, and if you ask who won the space race, most people would say it was the USA because they had the people on the moon. But if you look at the broad timeline, the USSR was in front many times, but it's a debatable subject. When it comes to the Cold War, it wasn't only the arms race and the space race. Whatever these two nations did in competition, it was more than that competition itself. Athletics or chess or gymnastics, if there was a participant of the USSR and a participant of America, the world looked differently at that event. I hope you enjoyed lesson 7. In the next lesson, lesson 8, we are going to discuss stories. There are loads of stories of the Cold War, and we are just going to look at a couple of stories specifically in Berlin during the Cold War. So please enjoy lesson 8. See each other next time.